Yeah, Deacon Max, what is the first big theme that you see in this song? This is actually one that you notice and that you wanted to talk about.
I would say this theme is really kind of the heart of the matter. You know, it's really kind of the central thesis of the song. It's what pulses throughout the entire song, and kind of the, if you will, the spiritual diagnosis we found with it. And it has to do with spiritual poverty. Right? Spiritual poverty. I don't know if you've ever heard that terminology before. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But spiritual poverty is, in simple terms, the absence of God in one's life. Right? The absence of love in one's life. Right? So there's different types of poverty, right? So like we could talk about physical poverty, right? Health, lack of health. We could talk about material poverty, lack of money, or, you know, whatever physical good, a car, a couch, food. There's different types of poverty. And the one I think running throughout this song is spiritual poverty. That's what Frank Ocean is intuiting without saying it throughout the whole song.
Yeah, and so, and this song is about people, super rich kids, it's called, people who are not experiencing material or physical poverty. They have an overabundance of material and physical resources, but they are deeply spiritually poor. And I also think it's important to make a distinction here, because this can be somewhat confusing language, because every once in a while, like Jesus will talk about blessed are the poor in spirit, right?
Correct.
This is one of the Beatitudes. And so when we're talking about this kind of spiritual poverty that we're addressing on this episode, that's not what we're referring to. When Jesus is talking about poverty of spirit, he's talking about like a deep sense of humility, a deep sense of dependence on God for everything, knowing that you're nothing without the Father. The spiritual poverty that we're talking about in this episode is much more what Deacon Max was just saying. It's an absence of God. It's a lack of a relationship with him, such that even if you have an abundance of material resources, you're still interiorly empty. And I think something that helps me kind of understand what we're talking about very well is this quote from Mother Teresa. Our listeners probably know that I personally have a big devotion to Mother Teresa. I've been really very inspired by her, moved by her. I depend upon her intercession a lot in my life. But, you know, she was an incredible woman because she spent so much time in India, in Calcutta, in the midst of extreme material and physical poverty, like poverty that we can't even imagine here in America. People dying on the streets, starving to death, lepers, sick people who she would care for and tend to. But then Mother Teresa, you know, by the time her life was over, she had also come here to America. She had also come here to Western Europe and to other countries in the West. And she had noticed that even though we here weren't dying on the streets like people were in Calcutta, we were dying on the inside. And she said we were, this is so incredible. She said that there was more spiritual poverty in the Western countries than there is material poverty in the Eastern countries. So like that person who on the streets of Calcutta who's skin and bone and who is starving to death is not as poor materially as many of us here in America are spiritually. That's how empty we are on the inside.
And that's intense coming from a woman who's literally picking these people up off the streets. Like that shows you kind of the profound nature of spiritual poverty.
It's insane. So that's kind of that dynamic is I think what we're going to be seeing in this song. So maybe to get into the song, we can just start. Deacon Max, you want to read the chorus for us? It's very, I mean, the song is very, it's very deep. It's very powerful.
Yeah, sure. So here's a chorus. Too many bottles of this wine we can't pronounce. Too many bowls of that green, no lucky charms. The maids come around too much. Parents ain't around enough. Too many joy rides in daddy's Jaguar. Too many white lies and white lines. Super rich kids with nothing but loose ends. Super rich kids with nothing but fake friends. I mean, that shows you, right, too many bottles of this wine we can't pronounce. First of all, there's a lot of bottles of wines names that I can't pronounce. Just like generally, same. Well, that's a Snoop Dogg's wine. I can say that. I don't know what the actual title of it is, but that's my point. My point being here that like he's recognizing that they have all of these things. They have the Jaguar, they have the drugs, right? They have the money, but they also have loose ends, fake friends. They're lacking something more transcendent than the external material goods. There's something deeply inside of him he's recognizing, and his friends that's missing.
Yeah, and this is so common, I think, when people are experiencing the spiritual poverty, when they don't have a relationship with their parents. So he says parents ain't around enough. The maids come around too much, right? So I'm not being raised by parents who love me. I'm being kind of relegated to the responsibility of these maids who don't know me, right? People who experience that, people who have no concept of God or transcendence in their lives, what do they often do? They turn to drugs. They turn to destructive behavior. And what they're trying to do is fill this void within them that is created by this absence of God, this absence of authentic love. And they just, a lot of times it leads to just destruction because that hole in your heart, this has become a cliche in many circles, but the hole in your heart truly is infinite. And no matter how much material stuff you shove in there, you can't satiate your spiritual poverty, which longs for one thing, which is God.
And this is interesting, digression here, but it's interesting. He says fake friends because a lot of us can think that having a lot of people around us is also filling our soul.
That's a good point.
But that's not true. Many of us have encountered people in our lives that we know actually don't wish the best for us, or actually aren't around, or have a particular interest in us for a particular reason, right? And so, because we're longing for something deeper than just a lot of people, right? Or interested relationships. It's like our soul is longing for communion.
Yes.
Authentic communion.
Yes.
Right? It's not just seeking, we can talk about, I guess, material wealth in the sense of you have all these people around you. That's fine. But that's not what you long for. What you long for, you can have 2 or 3 deep friendships,
yes.
And that's enough to feed your soul.
That's right, because I think you just said it, communion. What the human heart needs is to know and to be known by another. Right. And that we need that on a human level with real friendships, with intimate friendships, which cannot just be satisfied by smoking weed next to someone and pretending like we're having a deep conversation, even though we're just high. And it also can't be satisfied by material possessions. It can only be satisfied by real love, real loving friendships, real loving parents, and ultimately the real love of God, who knows us more deeply than anyone.
Correct. And another verse actually talking about this, Joe, is when he talks about, he says, real love, I'm searching for a real love.
Yeah.
Talk about real love. Real love, I'm searching for a real love. Right. And this is kind of this is interesting in the song composition because this is the echo. It's not the prominent voice, but it's the kind of just in the back, real love. I'm searching for that real love, right? And that's again the longing in Frank Ocean and all of us. It doesn't matter where you are in life. We all look for real love. The difference is that some are given it and some are not as much, right?
Yeah, Deacon Max, do you know the is this song autobiographical? Is Frank Ocean singing about himself and his own experience?
I think what it is maybe about a friend.
Okay.
Yeah, or maybe is maybe an existential reflection in relationship to friends, because part of the song includes, and we'll talk about this later in the episode, the suicide, I think, of a friend.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's his whole friend group was longing for real love, and he basically saw the destruction of his friend because they never received that because they were spiritually poor and they were starving. It seems to me.
Yeah, that's so I was just going to say, if this is, so presumably though, Frank Ocean is not unfamiliar with this kind of lifestyle. Presumably he has had a lot of money, had a lot of done a lot of drugs, drank a lot. Is that, am I wrong in thinking that?
No. It's I mean, in fact, they talked about the silver spoon, which is probably heroin.
Yeah.
Or methamphetamine. I mean, it could be, or cocaine. I mean, it's just heavy drugs that they're using in the song. You know.
So what's fascinating to me about that is someone who's living this type of lifestyle is still aware on a deep level that none of these things are satisfying him, right? And no matter how much he tries to fill himself up, he's still you could think that people who are living this type of lifestyle just become so numb and so spiritually dead that they don't even, that longing within them for true communion is completely silenced, but it never is. And even in the midst of this type of behavior, he still can not even recognize, but articulate in this song that he's desiring real love and he's not getting it in any of these places, which I think is I think it's amazing, and I think it's kind of a source of great hope that somebody who's in the throes of this type of sin and spiritual death can still be like desiring what's truly good. The problem is, what's the outlet for that, and where do I find what I'm looking for?
Yeah, I wonder oftentimes, Joey, and this is not biblical truth, but I remember one time Jordan Peterson saying, "The nature of man's dialogue is prayer." Right, and I think what he meant by that is this idea that like all of the things we encounter in reality to varying degrees speak to us, and then we speak we enter them into our interior dialogue. And so like this song is kind of an expression of what's going on in his mind and heart, what he's seeing. So it comes off, and this is one of the things with I think songs in general and related to poetry is that it's almost like a prayer.
Yeah.
It's like an interior dialogue with the circumstances he finds himself in. A prayer, like, not saying explicitly, right? And so there are distinctions of prayer, so I don't want to equate them, but there's something in him that's like, I need help.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
like I want truth. I long for goodness. I desire true beauty. There's something in him kind of reaching out, but weakened in his will. For whatever reason, and it seems to me for this lifestyle and the lack of love he's been giving in the home, amidst his friendships, whatever the case may be. So anyways, there's some of that.
Yeah, I want to read this first full verse, and just because I just noticed something in it that I find really fascinating. So let me just read it and then comment on it, then you can comment on it, and then we'll get into our next theme. So this first verse, he says, "Start my day up on the roof. There's nothing like this type of view. Point the clicker at the tube. I prefer expensive news. New car, new girl, new ice, new glass, new watch. Good times, babe. It's good times, yeah. She washed my back 3 times a day. The shower head feels so amazing. We'll both be high. The help don't stare. They just walk by. They must don't care. 1,000,001, 1,000,002. 100 more will never do." Okay, so here's one thing I noticed. I just noticed this now. Max, start my day up on the roof. I'm thinking of another guy who started his day up on the roof, and it was King David.
Oh, talk to me. What's the connection here?
King David, he's this could be a stretch, but I'm just symbolically, this is interesting that this connection exists. So King David, he's this great king in the Old Testament. He was the Lord's anointed, the Lord's chosen one. His heart was after the heart of the Lord, and he was supposed to be leading Israel out to battle, leading his men, being a true king, a true servant, a true warrior for the Lord. But one day, instead of going out to battle, instead of taking up his cross, if you will, instead of taking on his responsibility, he just decided to stay home, and he went up on his roof to just relax. And it was as he was doing that he noticed Bathsheba bathing in the nearby stream. And so it was like this position of just relaxing, being up on the roof, led him into this temptation, which led to the most like awful sin that he ever committed, which was, sleeping with Bathsheba, committing adultery, and then having her husband murdered to try to cover it up. So
there's some relationship between like the view of the world and seeing where you fit into that picture.
Yeah.
Kind of like, where's my life now that I see? I mean, and this is like this is a classic kind of metaphor, right? The top of the mountain, rooftop experience.
Yeah.
This whole idea of like, that's the top is where humanity meets divinity, something like that.
Yeah, it's like, in a sense, he's like, he and King David in a perverted way are trying to climb up to God. They're trying to climb up to heaven, which is why they want to go up, to be on the roof. So Frank Ocean and all his friends are hanging out on the roof doing all these drugs.
Yeah.
And enjoying just this insane amount of material possessions, cars, there's women, a new watch, good times.
But then 1,000,001, 1,000,002, 100 more will never do.
Exactly. That's what it is. So. No, it doesn't matter how much. What's the first thing a millionaire wants usually? Is to be a billionaire. Because no matter how much money you get, you always want more if your God becomes money and if you are spiritually poor. Mm-hmm. Also, just one more reference so the help walk by as we're smoking weed, and they don't stare, they don't care. So again, not like nobody cares about me. Nobody sees me. Nobody knows me. And because of that, I'm just going to try to fill this void with drugs, alcohol, sex, women, whatever. And dude, I don't know about you, but I know so many people like this. Like I was very blessed to grow up in a very affluent community. And my family was not remarkably rich, although I was always so well taken care of. But some of my friends in high school, some of the people I was around were just like so wealthy, and they were so miserable. Their parents did not care about them. They weren't around. They had everything they wanted, all the material stuff they wanted, but they were so miserable. And they turned to things like drugs from a very young age. Freshman in high school, I can remember some of these girls just like starting to like do hard drugs, and just it was heartbreaking to see, because I could see their spiritual poverty.
Yeah, that's the case time and time again. And not to talk too much more, but I think there's something to be said about the relationship between kind of affluent societies and suicide. Somewhere like Sweden, as an example, comes to mind. I mean, America too, arguably. We have in a lot of ways material wealth, but the poverty that we suffer with that is rampant is spiritual poverty. And so